New tonight at 10, Hannibal voters will hit the polls on Tuesday for two propositions. The first is a 0.5% sales tax to fund emergency services, and the second is a change to the city's charter to allow the mayor to make government appointments. WGEM's Zeke Shapiro spoke with a Hannibal councilman and residents. So Zeke, what is the consensus there on the election?
Daniel, the mood is positive among Hannibal residents and city officials over the vote. They tell me both propositions can be positive to the local community. Higher taxes are usually not something people are in favor of, unless, of course, lives are on the line.
The people need the policemen, we need the firemen, and they need help, and they need a little bit of extra money.
For longtime Hannibal residents Lori Fowler and Scott Snyder, the public opinion on the propositions is unique. And when was the last time that you remember that a tax was so well received by the community?
I can't really.
The other proposition takes the city manager's role of appointing government positions and gives that power to the mayor instead.
It was more appropriate that the elected officials make those decisions on those board seats instead of unelected official.
First Ward Councilman Scott Haycraft explained the proposition won't make as much of a difference, but for residents like Fowler and Snyder, they see it as a good look for the city.
On the face of it, I think the optics are better for one, because, they're elected.
The people that are elected should be able to elect other people in and get them into office also.
For both propositions, Fowler, Snyder, and Haycraft see them as ways to give more power to the people.
It does seem like we have a better voice.
And so as Hannibal residents head to the polls to decide the financial future of their emergency services and who can put officials in charge, it seems like the mood is pretty positive around America's hometown. It is this probably one of the few times where you're a fan of both propositions on the ballot?
Very much so. Usually I'm kind of torn down, but these I'm both very happy for. Yes, sir.
First Ward Councilman Scott Haycraft told me the 0.5% sales tax will mainly be used to offset some salary increases that were given to members of the Hannibal Fire and Police Departments. Daniel?
All right, thank you, Zeke. And for the other proposition, if it's passed, the mayor will be able to appoint people to the Board of Public Works, the Park Board, the Zoning Commission, and the Board of Adjustment.